Ends with us lawsuits. Let's dive in, shall we?
By the light of the silvery moon, I want to tell my honey I'll love you.
Okay, buckle up, everyone. I know I use Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni and the It Ends With Us lawsuit as a point of discussion from time to time, but it's come to my attention that not everyone is up to speed on this wild roller coaster of a situation. So I thought what we could do today is a 2025 recap of the shit show and get everyone sipping from the same cup of tea so everyone's aware of what I'm referencing when I talk about Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, and It Ends With Us. So I'll do kind of an overall summary of the situation, and then I'll take you through what are Blake Lively's allegations versus what are Justin Baldoni's allegations, and where we are now and moving into 2026. So in late December 2024, Blake Lively filed a California Civil Rights Department complaint, CRD complaint. And then a federal lawsuit, right after that, she filed a federal lawsuit alleging sexual harassment, retaliation, and related claims against Justin Baldoni and others involved in It Ends With Us and the New York Times, reporting her allegations and an alleged smear campaign using texts that were obtained from a shady legal loophole that may or may not be actually illegal. We'll see. That part has yet to be determined. Now, in early 2025, Justin Baldoni, who was not only the director of It Ends With Us, but also he was with the producing company and the production company, and he was also the main character, the main male protagonist. So Baldoni, after Blake Lively had filed her complaint and lawsuit, Baldoni filed a counter lawsuit against Blake Lively, Ryan Reynolds, and others for $400 million, accusing them of defamation and extortion. That's been his thing this whole time, is that, basically Blake Lively was just trying to take over the movie. And she was extorting him to do so. And the cases were consolidated in New York by His Honor Judge Louis J. Lyman, which some people love, some people hate. He does seem to be very Blake Lively forward, but it's my understanding that in these kinds of cases, the judges will tend to lean towards, whoever filed the complaint initially, just to make sure that, if they don't win the case, they can't come back and say that they weren't allowed to produce as much evidence as they wanted to or something, some such nonsense like that. But several of Baldoni's countersuits were later dismissed for failing to meet legal standards, while both sides continued discovery disputes and media positioning throughout 2025. So this has been a PR whirlwind. Like every day, something coming out about this case, literally every day. It is the case that keeps on giving. And as of late 2025, pretrial proceedings remain ongoing with a potential trial anticipated in May of 2026. And that is the pushed back date, because it was previously going to happen a little bit sooner in 2026, and then it got bumped for to do some criminal trials ahead. So let's break down what each side is accusing the other of. We'll start with Blake Lively's allegations. So Lively's central claims from her CRD complaint in California and from the federal suit that she filed in New York include sexual harassment or SH, I should say it's SH, and inappropriate behavior by Baldoni and producer Jamie Heath on set. And we later find out that Justin Baldoni's terrible action here was that he called a pair of pants and a onesie sexy because his co-stars had been using that term as well. Apparently what Jamie Heath did was he was told he could come into Blake Lively's trailer while she was breastfeeding, and she said, "You can't make eye contact with me." And then while he was talking with her, he made eye contact with her. So, you know, whatever. So another one of her claims was retaliation for raising concern about workplace conduct. And we later find out that what she considered to be retaliation was organic online hate for Blake Lively, and Justin Baldoni's actions to preemptively defend his reputation against what he deemed to be false claims and accusations. That's retaliation, according to Blake Lively. You can't defend yourself against what you feel are false claims if Blake Lively is your accuser. That's the law. And she also claimed a coordinated public and online smear campaign involving crisis PR professionals to damage her reputation when she complained about misconduct. And here's my take on that. I, as a human being, 100% dislike and actively boycott Blake Lively and anyone even remotely associated with her at this point, because I do not like her. I made that decision myself as a human being. And I am a human being, not a PR bot, as Blake Lively claims. Her online demise was completely organic, and she has no proof otherwise in a lot of people's opinion. Another one of her complaints was failures to prevent or remedy harassment and hostile environment issues and related tort claims like emotional distress and invasion of privacy. We later find out that no formal complaints were made or filed at the time, and take a looky-loo. We also later find out, allegedly, that she couldn't prove emotional distress when asked to, so her lawyers encouraged her to downgrade her suffering to garden variety distress because she wouldn't have to prove anything formally if it's garden variety. Again, it's because she has no proof. Not a single witness to share how distressed she was. Not a single therapy session required. Not a single discussion with a medical professional. In my personal opinion, she's either hiding a serious personality disorder that would be exposed if she claimed true distress, or she's lying about being distressed at all. Either of these scenarios make perfect sense here, and neither of those scenarios make Blake Lively look good. She has also alleged that other cast or crew felt uncomfortable. She filed on their behalf. Though some specific dramatic early allegations seen in social chatter have not been central in the formal filings, and some descriptions of them have faded in later legal documents. So basically, she came out of the gate screaming about everything that Justin Baldoni had done. What a terrible perpetrator. We later find out that her husband, Ryan Reynolds, allegedly has been running around calling Justin Baldoni a sexual predator to producers, but he doubled down and said the same thing in a motion to the courts. Ryan thinks this is not defamation because he truly believes Justin is a sexual predator. Do we know if Ryan truly believes this because Blake Lively shared where she texted her husband that she was uncomfortable on set? No, it couldn't be that simple. Do we know if Ryan is privy to some past conviction or accusation against Justin Baldoni? No, none of that. That would be too easy. No, Ryan truly believes that Justin Baldoni is a sexual predator because once, some years ago or whenever, he said something on a podcast. It was a podcast about men sharing and opening up about their faults and how they can become better men. And on this podcast, Baldoni had the absolute gall one time to say that he feels bad that back in the day he didn't ask women for consent. Ryan goes, "Ha! Caught red-handed." Like what? Like what? Never mind the fact that no one asked for consent back in the day. No one. Literally no one asked for consent back in the day. But also, there was a lot of hugging on set. And this was another characteristic, according to Ryan Reynolds, of a sexual predator. But never mind the fact that it was the crew who was supposedly complaining to Blake that they are on camera initiating most of those hugs. So, what? But before we get to Justin Baldoni's defense and what his claims are, I have a quick message for the Blake Lively legal team, who are currently making bank off the back of Ryan Reynolds. But in my honest opinion, at the same time, losing their humanity and reputation in the process. Good luck, guys. Now, let's take a look at Justin Baldoni's defense allegations. In response to all of that shenanigans from the Reynolds, Baldoni and associated defendants have alleged that Lively's harassment claims and public narrative are false or exaggerated. And we have quite a bit of proof of that that's already been released. When she said, "Oh, the sky's on fire," actually it was really just a sunset. Another complaint was that Lively attempted to gain creative control of the production and then used retaliatory claims to deflect criticism and blame. Yeah. In his $400 million countersuit that was later dismissed because defamation countersuits are impossible, they claimed civil extortion, defamation, and invasion of privacy by Lively and her representatives. You know what that invasion of privacy thing was? Was them real backhandedly getting a hold of PR person's personal cell phone, and then illegally accessing it. Oh my God, unbelievable. They deny any orchestrated smear campaign. This is Justin Baldoni's team. They deny any orchestrated smear campaign against Lively, framing any media engagements or public messages as standard industry communications and disputing the harassment narrative. And Baldoni's team also contested evidence Lively's side cited and sought to introduce communications and timelines showing mutual conflict over the production environment. So basically, what she did was, Ryan Reynolds really, he wrote this big long list of things that you can no longer do on the set, or Blake Lively's not going to come back to the set. Well, this list listed out a whole bunch of hypotheticals that never happened. Would you sign a list if you had a verbal confrontation with someone and you just disagreed with them and they brought you a list afterwards and said, in order for me to continue working with you, you have to sign this list saying you're sorry and that you're going to make sure that none of this stuff happens again, using the word again, and in the list you see that you're being accused of sexual harassment, you're being accused of making people uncomfortable, you're being accused of bad touch. What? You're not going to sign that. You're not going to sign that, especially if you know it's not true. Why would you sign that? Oh my God. Unbelievable. So anyways, in summary, I get too excited about this case. In summary, Lively accuses Baldoni, the Wayfarer producers, and their PR agents of sexual harassment, retaliation, and a concerted campaign to undermine her professionally and personally. She claims that the online hate on her isn't by real people. It's a digital concerted effort to take her down. Well, coming from the hate group myself, I can again expressly confirm that I dislike Blake Lively as a human being, and I will actively boycott her and anyone even remotely associated with her until my dying day, and I am not a bot. Baldoni says Lively's claims are false and that she sought control of the film and then used legal claims to damage his reputation. His defamation extortion countersuit has been largely dismissed, again because it is so impossible to win a defamation suit, especially against somebody who's out there in the public. But a countersuit was never really meant to be won. It was always going to be dismissed because it's so hard to prove defamation of a person who's famous, nearly impossible. But the filed countersuit did ensure that Baldoni's side would get out there to the public, and that was likely the whole purpose of the countersuit, was just to get his side out there, where Blake Lively was already trying to set the tone on what a supposed degenerate, Baldoni was. Except now the truth is coming out, much to Blake Lively's dismay. The court is ongoing with pretrial activity and discovery disputes, and some claims are set for trial in 2026. I have my popcorn ready, guys. Now let's take a look on the dark side of the moon, and let's see what we can learn from Blake Lively's, see you next Tuesday antics. Take a little trip with me. Let's pretend the whole "it ends with us" lawsuit wasn't a dirty power grab, in my opinion. And for fun, let's play pretend that Blake Lively is actually being genuine in her complaints of SH and retaliation. Fat chance, in my opinion. Just like Blake being cast as Lily Bloom, but I digress. Let's say you, female, as most of my audience is, let's say you find yourself in an uncomfortable work setting and a male supervisor continues, after you've asked him not to, continues to initiate long, tightly held hugs. And again, this is even after you've asked him to stop. So let's first take a look at how communication could have prevented this, explosion. Many large interpersonal or public conflicts don't begin with malice. They begin with avoidance. And, we're taking a look at this with two lenses. You've got the "it ends with us" legal case, and then we're looking at our personal scenario, and we're bringing this into the real world. What would happen if you, as a woman, an employee, continuously came up against this supervisor who's male, who holds power over you and continues to put you into compromising situations that make you uncomfortable after you have asked him to stop? So that's a big one, and it's more common than people would think. But first, before we, take this guy to court, before we steamroll past HR and slap a lawsuit on the table, let's look at common early communication breakdowns. There are a few things that can really impede communication pretty early on. And this is where most of us get hung up. And I'm going to go over all of those. And it's, the common early communication breakdowns are unspoken expectations, power imbalances that discourage honesty, fear and discomfort or accountability, and indirect communication. So I'm going to break all 4 of those down for you so we can talk through them in one of the 2 scenarios that we have going on. We've got the it ends with us scenario. We've got, you and your supervisor. So let's break down unspoken expectations. I'll go over this topic in much more detail some other day. But ladies, I don't know who needs to hear this, but seriously, no one can read your mind. If you have an unmet need, dropping hints associated to high stakes needs is not the way to do it. Express yourself accurately if you want to be taken seriously by anyone. If you go through life expecting that people should know what you meant, you should have known what I meant by a look or a sigh or, the silent treatment. You will always get tossed to the side with your needs unmet. You will never have your needs met if you can't verbalize them. So stop it. Use your words. Anyway, back to the list of ways you can find yourself in situations with early communication breakdowns at a place of work. Here's a big one. Power imbalances that discourage honesty. And this is a situation that we have with the scenario that we set up with your huggy supervisor. This is a big one in the workplace, and oftentimes why people don't speak up is that power imbalance. And, they don't speak up about really improper situations. But you have rights as an employee, regardless of what state you're working in. And even if you don't feel comfortable complaining about a situation to anyone at your place of employment, your state's labor department will have steps you can take outside your place of employment. So, although I really do encourage you to use measures internally first, if you feel safe doing so, I want everyone to know that if you don't feel safe doing that, you can check with your state's labor department on what possible actions you can take. But asking someone to read your mind that you're feeling uncomfortable is not the way to do it. And keeping your mouth shut because you're afraid of power imbalances is also not the way to do it. You have to speak your words. You have to say your piece, and you have to talk to someone, whether that be your manager, somebody over the supervisor, your HR department, or if you don't feel comfortable inside your own company, going to the state, because there are plenty of opportunities for you to get this out there and to make sure that you are in a safe situation. So the next item is fear of discomfort or accountability. So why would you need to be afraid of discomfort or accountability by saying that somebody else did something to you that made you uncomfortable? Well, because this is the real world, and we all get in our heads, and situations are never as clean and clear cut as one would like them to be. So let's take a look at this tight hugger. For instance, your direct supervisor in our scenario, maybe you're worried about retaliation since you did initiate the very first hug that you had with him. Well, listen, hugging isn't illegal, but continuing to hug in a way that makes the other party uncomfortable and having been asked already to stop this activity and continuing makes it a reprimandable act that shouldn't be tolerated. So it doesn't matter how messy the situation is. If you are uncomfortable, it should not be tolerated. If you find that you feel some sense of responsibility in the matter, or you feel like somehow it's going to come back on you, I encourage you to still come forward and explain your side, because without it, it's just going to be swept under the rug. You have to come forward, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and there may be parts that you have to take accountability for, but ultimately your safety should matter first. And then, of course, there's indirect communication. In our scenario, you've made your expectations clear already, but because the action is being conducted by a supervisor who directly impacts your ability to achieve raises and promotions, you may feel like you can't speak up. But you start to harbor resentment for your supervisor, so you start saying negative statements about him to your coworkers. Only they have not experienced the invasive hugging or seen it, so they start feeling like you dislike the supervisor for no reason. So even though you've dropped hints and expected your side to just magically be known, now you just have a workplace full of people who don't know that you're struggling, they don't know what you're struggling with, and they believe you are now a negative impact on the team. So it does not ever serve you to drop hints instead of making your needs and wishes loud and clear. This is a Gwendie life lesson. I'll start a list for y'all once I get our website going. But what do you do with that? Now you know how the early communication breaks down, what effective communication would have been required for this scenario? How about early boundary clarification? This isn't okay for me. You did that one in the scenario, so check. We got that one marked off. We have already done that early boundary clarification. And when we say early boundary clarification, we are using our words. We are saying out loud, this particular action makes me feel uncomfortable. I do not want you to do it again. If you're not being that clear, then you're not setting boundaries. Direct documented conversations. This is a big one, especially in the workplace. And when I say direct documented conversations, we're not talking about emotional venting. We're not talking about you going, oh, can you believe that creep? And sending an email. No. You want to clearly define what's happening and get it in writing to protect yourself. If you feel safe doing so, of course you could send an email to the supervisor directly to ask him to stop the behavior and explain that you've already asked him once to do it. However, if you don't feel safe doing that, you could CC your HR or send just directly to your HR department if you're concerned about the outcome of exposing the supervisor's actions to him directly. So send yourself an email if you don't have any other way of accomplishing this comfortably. I do encourage you to involve a higher up or your HR department, but I do understand that some people legitimately do not feel comfortable doing so. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're sending yourself an email if you don't feel comfortable sending to anyone else, because at least that is a proof of something happening at a point in time. Now, if you're sending yourself an email going 2 years ago, this happened, and it's dated for today, that's not really helpful. You want to have a chronological list of what happened with date and time stamps, and that's what those emails can do for you. And it's going to help you keep your story straight, because the facts can get muddled after so long of being in an intense situation. And anytime you're hyper vigilant, you're gonna remember less details of a situation. So it's easy to lose those details when emotions are high. So this is a really great way to keep track of what happened chronologically. And then you want to repair attempts. You want to attempt to repair instead of automatically going toward defensiveness. We'll talk a little more about this here in a little bit, but I always try to talk through the situation, again, if you feel safe doing so. This is the most professional way to go about this. is to have a direct conversation with the supervisor. But do involve HR if you feel even the slightest bit weird about discussing this with the supervisor directly. You already tried that in this scenario. Keep that in mind. And so it is not unheard of to, at this point, go ahead and grab a third-party mediation. Before we get to legal escalation, we're still trying to mediate this situation. We're still trying to take it down a notch before it has to get escalated like they did with the It Ends With Us lawsuit. So third-party mediation before escalation, and this would be, again, your HR department. That is your best course of action for your first stop. Now, does it have to be your only stop? Absolutely not. Girl, you are out here to protect yourself. So you can also go to the state's labor department prior to involving legal counsel. So those are just some ways that we could effectively de-escalate the scenario so that it doesn't have to go to a legal filing. Most crises aren't caused by a single conversation or a single moment in time. They're caused by hundreds of little avoided ones. And so, continuing to avoid the situation isn't working. You actively said, please don't hug me. I don't appreciate it. And he continues, and you have tried your effective communication scenarios, and and now you're moving forward. But if you had continued to just accept the hugs or kind of like give a look and like wiggle away, you're not communicating your need to have the hugs stop. So you're continuing to avoid the scenario anytime you allow yourself to be hugged. So you've got to stand up, and it is an uncomfortable situation, but you have to make your needs known. When people don't address conflict early, the nervous system fills in the gaps, and that's really where stories start replacing facts, and we start getting really out of control in situations like this. In general, certain psychological patterns can be deduced when you encounter people who seem to thrive on twisting the details of any event to become, a benefit to them, laying waste to anyone who dares to get in their way. But before we dive in, it's important to be very clear here. This is for educational purposes only. Only licensed professionals can diagnose. But let's review common patterns seen in people whose superpower is manipulating people and narratives with obvious malice. We've probably all bumped into somebody like this. The patterns tend to include pathological externalization, cognitive distortion in combination with self-preservation, instrumental empathy, or weaponized empathy, as I like to call it, victim-persecutor switching, and we'll touch on each of these patterns and how to identify them. So again, this is how you're gonna find those manipulators out in the world. These are some really good techniques on how to identify these folks, so you could steer clear. So let's look first at the psychological pattern of pathological externalization. In these folks, responsibility is always placed outside the self, an external locus of control. These are the finger pointers. These are the everything is everyone else's fault. Harm is really reframed as misunderstanding. Oh, my lies ruined your life? I was only speaking my truth. I was just asking questions. Apologies are very rare or conditional and never sincere from these people. And these behaviors are often associated with narcissistic traits and severe insecurity masked as confidence. In my opinion, a particular Hollywood couple comes to mind. The next psychological pattern of manipulators to consider is equal parts cognitive distortion and self-preservation. I'm sure there's a word for this combo, but I've said it before, I'm not a psychological professional, so we must all suffer the consequences of that. So anyways, these are the folks who are so good at warping their reality, they actually start to believe their own lies. For these folks, events are unconsciously rewritten in their own brain to protect identity. And basically, they retell stories to themselves so they come out looking like the good guy to themselves. Other people may not buy it, but to themselves, they come out looking like the good guy. And they're really convinced of this story. The person genuinely believes their altered version. Some people can unconsciously rewrite their stories to such a degree they become delusional in believing their own lies. They then spread this information and spend an extraordinary amount of time and resources to convince everyone else of their own delusions. Contradictory evidence to these people feels very threatening instead of informative. So anytime someone points out a fact that negates their own delusional version, they start screaming about how they're being harassed and attacked. Remind you of anyone currently draining their bank accounts to stay relevant with PR tactics? Maybe anyone currently being highlighted in the New York Times or People Magazine or TMZ? Anyways, these unsettling behaviors can be seen in certain personality disorder traits and in trauma-based maladaptive coping skills. I could see that. The next psychological pattern of manipulators is instrumental empathy, or weaponized empathy, as I like to call it. These folks can really read others' emotions really, really well, like to a scary degree. But they twist the information they discover and are very skilled at weaponizing it against the person. They use that emotional insight for control, leverage, or image management. Kind of like how, in my opinion and allegedly, let's get those disclaimers out there, kind of like how Blake Lively sniffed out Brandon Sklenar's desperation to get into A-list films. He was an extra in It Ends With Us. I barely had any lines. So she got him to support her accusations about Baldoni. Unfortunately, this was after Brandon Sklenar had already gone on record to say that the filming of It Ends With Us and Baldoni as a director and an actor was amazing. I'm paraphrasing, but it was all positive from this guy prior to Blake Lively getting her claws into him and swooping him off to some, island retreat or some such crap. She got him a leading role in a new film. This is not a secret. Everybody's talking about it. Now that he already got his shiny new bribe. Oh, my bad. Did I say bribe? I meant his shiny new movie role that brought him from a D-list roster as basically a background character with 1 or 2 lines at best, all the way to an A-list director film as a leading role playing a character type he's never played before, but some way, somehow, this director who just got done working with Blake Lively and loves to kiss her butt just knew that Brandon Sklenar would be the perfect for this role after Blake Lively insisted. Well, of course, now he's backpedaling because he already got his shiny new role. We don't want to call it a bribe. It's not a bribe. It's just the shiny new role that Blake Lively got for him. Because now he's backpedaling and he's trying to get as far away from the Reynolds as possible. And I think it's hilarious. Just a general thought. But you got to remember to withhold a bribe until you get what you need from the situation. This is just all in my opinion. Loyalties from the kind of people who will accept a bribe only last until the payload drop. Duh. Not that I endorse bribing others, but I just wanted to share some rudimentary, elementary common sense with everyone. But I imagine the Moonlit Circle is filled with a much greater sense of empathy, compassion, and love than someone who would choose to get their way like a petulant child with lies and bribes, in my opinion, and a dash of kicking and screaming. Back to the patterns of instrumental empathy, where evil people tend to use your openness against you. For them, empathy is really performative. It's not reciprocal. Easy if you've been trained to act in any capacity. Just saying. These people can often be mistaken for charismatic, leadership material, or even emotionally intelligent. But this is a facade, like the little light dangling on the anglerfish to draw you in and make you feel safe before they strike. And the final and most damning psychological pattern of manipulators is victim-persecutor switching. The person actively harming another positions themselves in the storytelling as being the one harmed, while literally causing harm to that person. While literally actively causing harm to that person, they go, oh, I'm the victim. Critics become attackers. Kind of like how some famous people think that anything negative about them online couldn't possibly come from real people. It must be a rival trying to make them look bad in the press by attacking them with bots. Boundaries are framed as abuse for these folks. All you have to do is read through the depositions of It Ends With Us lawsuit to see a lot of double standards, and I know you are, but what am I, coming from the Blake Lively legal camp, in my opinion. Don't sue me, please. I don't have anything. They honestly aren't looking good in this. Blake Lively's legal team is just, they're really not looking good. And, and the legal team itself has taken to projecting complaints to the judge about activities they themselves are initiating. It's wild. You can't scream DARVO while actively conducting DARVO, but I digress. But this victim switching, this is a power-preserving strategy, not confusion. It's meant to make the original offender appear to be the actual victim. If you find yourself caught in a DARVO cycle, that stands for deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender, for those who don't know, and they call it DARVO. So essentially, DARVO is when someone is confronted about harm that they've done, they deny it, they attack the confronter, recast themselves as the victim, and that's DARVO. True abusers have this process down pat. I mean, it's their carpe diem. Don't argue the accusation. It feeds the trolls. And it literally feeds the abusive pattern, perpetuating the cycle of abuse. Since any kind of self-defense is undoubtedly being used against you as retaliation. So what you can do to protect yourself from DARVO or the pattern of victim-persecutor switching is, number one, anchor yourself to documented facts and nothing more. And if they don't exist, create them yourself. We talked about creating yourself emails, getting emails out there, making sure that the chronological issues are listed out. Something else that you can do to protect yourself from the victim persecutor switching is naming behaviors, not motives. This is a big one because you could say, you are continuing to hug me too tightly, even though I asked you to stop previously. This is a simple, direct statement. and it's naming the actual behavior. But again, you don't think clearly when emotions are high, so you might end up saying something like something emotional, like, "You're such a creep. Why are you trying to make me feel uncomfortable?" This is not going to get you anywhere. So it's definitely worth it to practice ahead of time the words that you want to say, because manipulators are going to use everything you say against you. You know, here in this situation where you've allowed the emotions to get the best of you, so you've said a statement that was not behavior motivated. It was talking about, you were assigning motives to your supervisor. You're saying, "You're a creep. That's why you did this. You're trying to make me feel uncomfortable. That's why you did this." You're trying to guess this person's motives. And you don't know what their motives are. You never will. And they're going to argue that point. Here you've tried to attach the motive to the action, and you give cause for someone to defend themselves when you do that. Because, they were just called a creep and being accused of trying to make you uncomfortable, where what you could have said was to just call out the behavior. And there's no denying that. You were continuing to hug me too tightly. The hug just happened. He can't say I didn't hug you. He just hugged you. You are continuing to hug me too tightly, even though I asked you to stop previously. Add that part in. If this is like the second or third time you've had this conversation, you need to make that reality clear to the person that is making you uncomfortable. And now they don't have anything to come back at you with, because the hug did happen. You don't know about creep status. You don't know if he was genuinely trying to make you feel uncomfortable. But what you've done is you've provided ammunition for him to argue your point. And you don't want to do that. So again, you want to name the behavior, not the motive, if you're going to communicate with this person. And then something else that you want to do is to reduce emotional engagement. You want to avoid saying the wrong thing or giving any kind of ammunition to these folks. So you really have to pull yourself in and be very careful about what you open yourself up to with manipulators. You want to go full gray stone to anyone attempting to use DARVO against you. And then use boundaries, not explanations. Because again, if you over-explain, you're just giving ammunition. Let's say that you say, "I've asked you multiple times to not hug me as it makes me feel uncomfortable." There, boundary set. You used a boundary. You said, "I've asked you multiple times, don't hug me, makes me feel uncomfortable." It's not a full-blown explanation, although you do provide a little bit of a rationale. You didn't dive into it. But sometimes when emotions are high, and especially for you people pleasers, or to some extent, you neurospicy folks who always tend to over-explain. You might end up saying in an overly emotional setting something like, "I'm just not very into hugging. When I was a child, I was forced to hug, blah, blah, blah." Like, don't do that. All you're doing is giving manipulative people more power over you. You're giving them additional ammunition. If you have clocked someone as being a manipulator, stop talking to them altogether, because everything that you give them is ammunition. Boundaries never require an explanation. In fact, like I said, you don't even need to say that the hug makes you feel uncomfortable. You can actually just say, "Do not hug me again." Boom, done. Drop the mic. Anything extra you add will be used against you by someone with pathological externalization, by someone who is a manipulator and uses tools like victim-persecutor switching, and someone who will weaponize empathy against you. I mean, these folks are quite something else, and you just need to steer clear from them. So let's see where we are. Important reminders. I do just want to remind everyone that not everyone who causes harm is malicious. We'll go over that here shortly. But impact matters more than intent. And the way you feel about a situation matters. You shouldn't try to bury your feelings for the sake of others' comforts. If you're uncomfortable in a situation, you have a right to set a boundary. So set it. Before we close up with the dark side of the moon, I just want to say that the shadow side isn't revealed really by dramatic villains, although we certainly find them there. It's revealed by patterns and by what people refuse to take responsibility for. This is where we find our lessons, and it's fantastic to be able to watch other people go through these scenarios so that we can learn from their situations along the way. Although, these are some pretty painful scenarios that we're talking about. Families are being ruined, companies are being destroyed, people's livelihoods are being flushed down the drain, and it's all happening as a spectacle in front of all of us in the media. And so it can't be easy for them to go through that. So we do want to give thanks to people who are, setting standards for situations like this and going through the paces to allow for us to learn from scenarios of this magnitude. So just wanted to throw that out there, that I do know that people are struggling. So I don't want that to be swept under the rug. That when we analyze, it ends with us. We're talking about real people's lives that is being destroyed in front of our very eyes. And also to close up the dark side of the moon, healthy people, mentally, emotionally healthy people, can tolerate accountability. They can open their minds to the notion of being wrong or ignorant. Unhealthy people and systems, such as folks with chronic pathological externalization and folks who lean into victim blaming, require distortion to survive. Reality doesn't jive with them, so they create their own. And the moment you stop participating in the distortion, is going back to this gray rocking these folks, the moment you stop feeding the trolls, you step back into your own light, quietly, powerfully, and intact. Don't let people lost in the shadows steal your light. That's all I'm saying. So what do we do with this information? Now that we know who these folks are, and we can pinpoint them and what their day-to-day activities are and how they're going to interact with us and how we might be able to protect ourselves in those interactions. What do we do with that information? So to stay on target with our topic of people who use and abuse and manipulate, for tonight's teaching journey, I'd like to show you how to protect yourself from let me just say it, the Blake Lively's of the world. And if you find yourself backed into a corner and forced to defend yourself from a garden variety actress with a garden variety behavioral issue, in my opinion, and very poorly scripted lies, in my opinion, protection is not about confrontation in those situations. The good Lord knows that Blake Lively is a lost cause and she's his problem now. But protection from someone like that is about structure. Because listen, someone else's garden variety crap can bring a serious and unmanageable level of chaos into your world. So you need to be on alert and aware of your surroundings at all times. I'm going to take you through some practical self-protection tools you can utilize if someone starts causing drama in your own life. And these tools can be used for any kind of chaos demon. This is not specific to the issues that were present on the It Ends With Us movie set. So if anyone's bringing drama and chaos into your life, listen up. These are the steps you need to take. Document early. Keep records of agreements, conversations, and boundaries set. And the best way to write those out and to document them is in real time, to make sure that there's real-time timestamps. Written clarity reduces narrative manipulation later, and having a clear chronological order of events is one of the best ways to remember exactly what happened and to not feed into whatever made-up situation is going to embellish your story from a manipulator later on. Do not over-explain. This is a big one. I mean, if you have to respond to these people, you keep it nice and short and sweet. Over-explaining gives manipulators more material. And the more material they have, the faster they can take you down, and with greater purpose. Clear, brief boundaries are safer. Don't touch me. I mean, you can make it as simple as that. Do not touch me. In fact, reduce or eliminate overall interactions with these folks whenever possible. It's not just about don't over-explain. It's, pull back on even having encounters with them. Watch behavior, not words. And this is a big one for life in general. Like, people talk a lot. People can talk all kinds of stuff, but do they back it up with their behaviors? And that's where you're going to find a person's character. You want to look at promises versus actual patterns. You want to look at accountability versus justification. Is someone making excuses, or are they saying, got it, I'll not do that again. I understand what I did was wrong. I won't do that again. Repair versus reputation management. Are they actually trying to repair a situation or a relationship, or are they just looking to make themselves look better? Consistency tells the truth faster than charm, and actions will always be more telling than reputation. Something else is to use third-party anchors, especially whenever there's a power imbalance, like we were talking about with the hugging supervisor. You want mediators, you want HR, you want legal counsel, you want neutral witnesses if there's a power imbalance. Start wherever you feel most comfortable along the way. And again, I do encourage internal addressing this internally within a company before trying to take it to the state or to external legal counsel. But power imbalances do require some kind of external stabilizer. So I don't recommend that, if you have somebody higher up than you and you have come to them with a complaint about their behavior and they don't immediately repair that, then you need an external stabilizer in that situation. You need a neutral third party to help you through those conversations. So that's all I'm going to say about that. But also, trust your own nervous system. Your gut tells you when people aren't good for you. Confusion, dread, or hypervigilance, those all equal data. All of those feelings and sensations, they're not confusion. You're picking up signs that something is off here. Trust your gut. You don't need proof to step back and make yourself safe. If Mr. Hugger was, if he stopped immediately hugging you, but now he puts his hand on your shoulder, you don't need to start hey, I would like to let you know that I don't like your hand on my shoulder. You don't have to start that process all over again. That is the same situation. You're hugging me too tightly. Now you're putting your hand on my shoulder when I asked you to stop. That's still second warning. We don't start back at one. So you know what I mean? You don't need at that point proof of what he was thinking in his head. You don't need proof that it was an innocent move. No, you asked him not to hug you so tightly, and his next move was to put his hand on your shoulder. as a person who is not intimate with each other, that is inappropriate. So trust your instincts first and foremost, because, safety is reason enough. Your safety is reason enough. So, at the end of the day, self-protection isn't about winning an argument or proving someone wrong. It's about preserving your peace, your reputation, and your nervous system. Because let me tell you, manipulators, they can turn your world upside down in a heartbeat. They can bring in the chaos. People who use, twist, and abuse narratives thrive on reaction. They want engagement. They want confusion. They want you pulled into defending yourself against a story that was never written in good faith to begin with. And you don't owe anyone access to you. You don't owe explanations to people committed to misunderstanding you. You don't. If someone is just absolutely not going to hear you, you don't owe that person an explanation. You certainly don't owe anyone an over explanation, and you don't need consensus to step back. The only thing you need is to feel not safe. But structure is your safety with these folks. With manipulators, documentation is your anchor, and distance is not weakness, it's discernment. You got get out of my circle. We don't like manipulators in our circle. So, when you stop trying to connect the chaos and you stop, or connect with the chaos, and you stop trying to understand the chaos, you stop trying to correct the chaos, and you start containing it with boundaries instead, the dynamic changes. The noise loses oxygen and the pattern reveals itself. This is usually when manipulators will get tired of you because you're no fun to play with if you're not going to play along with their rules. And you stay intact while someone else is exhausting themselves chasing control of you. And so, that's fantastic. Don't give them anything. Trust what your body is telling you too. Protect your clarity. And remember that walking away early is often the most powerful boundary you can ever set. You don't have to listen to someone. You don't have to hear someone out. Now, if you're in a professional setting, it's a little different. It's a little different of rules, I mean, if your supervisor comes to you and needs to talk to you about something work related, you can't just be like, well, I don't want you in my vicinity because once you hugged me too tightly and I had to ask you to stop. Okay. If that is a situation, if that is a scenario, you can no longer accept work instruction coming from this human being. You absolutely have to involve HR at that point, because now you're being, non-compliant in your own employment. And that's not a good look. And so you want to make sure that you are balancing your professionalism with these situations. And the most professional thing to do is to document early. So make sure that you're reaching out to HR or your state labor board, or your certification board, or any of that nature. And the labor department is always going to have ideas on where you can go. But yeah. So, and also you don't have to fight every single battle. Just because a manipulator comes at you with an accusation or with something wrong, or they want to try and engage with you in some way, you just need to know when it isn't yours to fight. If the battle's not yours, then step away. You need to also, remember how to protect yourself against those who seek to destroy others. And
By the light of the silvery moon,